Hello, hello. Thank you, everybody. Oh, look, we're only 8 minutes late. It felt a lot later to me because I'm usually a very on time person. Yeah, I'm the kind of person who forgets everything. As they know, when the one time I was entrusted the tech equipment, yeah, no, did not remember that. But I'm usually on time. So starting a little bit late today, but thank you very much, everybody, for being here at Brockton Writers Series, July 9th. Our goodbye swan song to Glad Day Lit will be back at their new venue probably in September, but you know, we've been here a long time. So please treat Glad Day well, buy some drinks. They've got lovely mocktails if you don't drink. They've got cocktails if you do. And you know, we love Glad Day. So we wish to acknowledge that we do our work on the territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, and Mississaugas of the Credit. And we all have a responsibility, especially settlers like myself, but everybody has a responsibility to acknowledge the way that genocide and colonization has impacted Indigenous people. And you know, people like myself who are settlers, you know, have an extra burden and extra responsibility to think about what our ancestors contributed to that with like silences and with actions, and then to like process that into ways we could actually take action. So like, I don't think land acknowledging is enough. I like to take this opportunity to say, you know, if you're paying attention to the issues at hand, there's always a good reason to, you know, contact your local representatives, your elected officials, to, you know, pressure them to do something about about many things. Boil water advisories on reserves, missing and murdered Indigenous Two-Spirit women and girls, even implementing all of the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which has not happened yet. You know, and if you email them, that's one thing, you know, I don't know if you know this, but actually like writing, like mail is more impactful. So you can write that email and just print it off. You don't even have to use a stamp. You can email the government for free. I don't know if you know that, but you just put it in an envelope, put it in the mailbox, and it matters more to them because, I don't know, they're dinosaurs, but it makes more of an impact if you actually write. But you know, if you're not a writing person, I like to emphasize that here because I think we're probably all writing people, but if you're not a writing person, you can also like show up at protests, show up at demos, protect land defenders. And you can also, you know, use your money to support Indigenous businesses and artists and writers, some of whom we program here, and we make a point of programming Indigenous people and into this program, into this event, because we think that's really important. It's also in our mandates to Indigenous to feature, you know, Black and disabled and LGBTQIA voices. This is an anti-oppressive state event. And, you know, I hope you keep that in mind when the question period comes up, but, you know, generally our audiences are very respectful. Whenever I come up here these days, I feel like I can't talk about colonization and genocide without saying like, hey, there's a really obvious one also right now happening. So, you know, that what's happening in Palestine is also something you could talk to your elected representatives about, because, you know, while we were very slow to acknowledge any sort of genocide going on at all, even though Amnesty and the UN and the ICJ and like literally every human rights organization in the world was like, hey, that's a genocide. So Canada's kind of getting there now, but we are still selling military technology to Israel. So Canadian made goods are like bombing Palestine and also now Iran. So that's not good. And that is something you could apply some political pressure to, and I really encourage you to do that. And yeah, Black Lives Matter, trans voices matter. Yeah. Thank you to everybody who is here today and those of us on YouTube. So people are watching on our YouTube channel now. We will do a Q&A with all of the readers after they read, and we'll do another Q&A after the guest speaker talks. So as you think of questions, please type them into the chat, because there's a little bit of a lag, so that'll help us all. We were founded in November 2009, which means that we've been active for a really long time. Now is the part where, we would thank our volunteers. So I'm Dorianne Emerton. This is Faye Dock. Gisela is not here tonight. Nancy's not here tonight. And Iris Robbins, they're here. If you're interested in volunteering, we always need more help. Please hit us up. And we'd also like to thank the Ontario Arts Council. We depend on them. They give us funding. We feel like it's very, very, very important to pay people for their work, to pay artists for their work. So we will at a certain point pass around like a picture and ask you to do PayPal and all that sort of stuff. But thank you so much to the Ontario Arts Council. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. And now on to Brockton's guest speaker. Jade Wallace, they, them, is a poet, novelist, and critic. They are the author of 2 poetry collections, a genderless novel under the name Made, 2 collaborative poetry collections. Most recently, Made's Zoo, that said, Zoo, it's fun to say, came out in 2025 with Palimpsest Press. You can find out more at jadewallace.ca or ma-de.ca. And Jade is from away, not from Toronto, and is on the screen.
Hi, everyone. I am Jade. Thank you so much for having me. I am several hours away from Toronto now. So I'm grateful to be beamed in by Brockton for this little talk on book blurbs. I do have a slideshow of sorts. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm hoping you can all see the slideshow. Someone please let me know if not. So this talk is on the good and bad of book blurbs. Just a little advance apology to any graphic designers attending. I know there is at least one, my partner, so sorry to him and sorry to any others. I am not a graphic designer, as you will tell from the slideshow. So what authority do I bring to this topic of book blurbs? Very honestly, not a lot. I am not a book blurb expert. I don't think really any kind of expert in particular. But I think authority is a little bit overrated, and I'm going to present some ideas to you, and I think you can judge for yourself whether they are good and helpful ideas. Having said that, I do have a little bit of experience in this field. Brockton did not choose completely unwisely in bringing me here to talk about book blurbs. So for 3 years, I was the first and only editor of the review section of a magazine called Carousel, which was a hybrid literary arts magazine that ran somewhat off and on, but for about 40 years altogether, before they finally ceased in 2023. During the time I was reviews editor, we actually published 146 traditional experimental reviews, which is quite a caseload for us, I guess, in that time. The photos here are just some covers of Carousel, like some of the last issues. And then also there's a couple, we should do little graphics for our reviews as well. I've also written book reviews and literary criticism for a number of venues like Malahat Review, Hamilton Review of Books, the League of Canadian Poets, Ampersand Review, other places. Why am I mentioning all this about book reviews? Mainly because it really does inform my approach to book blurbs, which is partly a disclaimer. That is my bias. I am coming at book blurbs as a book reviewer primarily. But I also do have some specific book blurb experience. So I have written 4 book blurbs today, with 1 pending shortly. I've received about 8 blurbs in total for my 3 books, my poetry collection, my novel, and then my collaborative book, Zoo as Made. I've also notably recently written an article on book blurbs for Writer's Digest called How to Love a Book Blurb. That one was a little bit more just geared towards all the ways that book blurbs can be great. This presentation will be a little bit more of maybe a balanced perspective of the pros and cons of book blurbs and how to navigate between those things. So I will tell you up front, I can't actually tell you what is good or bad about book blurbs because honestly, I don't think there is anything objectively good or bad. Different people probably value different things in their blurbs, whether they are writers or readers or publishers. So you're going to have to ultimately decide for yourself how you want to approach book blurbs, whether you're coming at them as a reader, writer, or publisher. But having said all that, with these many caveats, I do believe it's really helpful to see how other people think about problems or issues so that that can inform how you also think your way through a problem or issue. So even though I'm not a book blurb expert, I have actually done a disproportionate amount of thinking about the issue of book blurbs. And so what I'm going to try to do here is like lead you along the path of my thinking about them and my orientation towards them. And maybe for some of you, you'll just agree with what I'm saying and you'll be like, that's it. That's now my opinion on book blurbs. But more likely than not, you're kind of probably going to build on some of these ideas or think about them later, have your own ideas, disagree with me, whatever. Whatever your response is, I think that's great. I think the important thing tonight here is that we're talking about the issue of book blurbs and we're like working through some of the problems together. So for me, when I'm thinking about book blurbs, as I said, I've done a lot, particularly this year for a number of reasons. I like to start by thinking about or reminding myself what it is that I really value about book blurbs. So for me, there are three sort of big ones. So I like contributing to conversations about literature. I like selecting and arranging beautiful words, and I like the idea of building a literary ecosystem. Um, and what do I mean by that? Let's unpack that for a second. So, contributing to conversations about literature. So, this is where you see kind of my background in book reviewing come in. I do believe that like books are not just these objects kind of isolated from the world around them. They are very much part of discourse and part of our ideas that are floating around in society. And I think having explicit conversations about books is important. And, maybe not all book blurbs fulfill this function, but I actually think book blurbs do have the capacity to contribute to these conversations about literature. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. Selecting and arranging beautiful words. Before I was ever doing book blurbs, I was writing and reading, and I love the process and the craft of writing. And that is one of the things that also informs my approach to book blurbs, as we'll go into further again in a minute. Building a literary ecosystem. I like the word ecosystem because I think community is a very good word and it describes a lot of things aptly. It's not always my favorite word because community often implies a sense of belonging and acceptance and all these kind of like positive connotations that, I think some of us can feel ambivalent about at times. I mean, there are lots of times when we maybe feel like we're not part of the community or not as much a part of various literary communities as we might want to be, but thinking of it more as like an ecosystem where in fact everything is interdependent and everything is really contributing to one another's existence, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, but we're all surviving in this literary ecosystem. Sometimes I find it helpful to think about it that way so that it doesn't put like so much pressure on the term community. You of course may have a completely different view of that. That's cool. Anyways, these three things, as it turns out, are not just things I value in book blurbs, they're things I value about literature more generally. But today we're going to apply these values to book blurbs specifically. On the other hand, I also think it's really important to understand what you dislike and what maybe you even hate. And I think this helps us understand book blurbs, literature, all those kinds of things. I mean, culture is very bound up with taste and with priorities and values and norms and all these kinds of things. And so if we're going to look at what we value and like about book blurbs, I think it's also equally important to look at what drives us up a wall about them. And then that helps steer our conversations around them and helps steer us in terms of our own orientation towards this issue of book blurbing. So I actually think that by looking at what things we don't like about book blurbing, that will help guide us, ironically, towards a better relationship with book blurbs. So my own pet peeves about book blurbs. I do not like the ways they can sometimes reinforce literary hierarchies. I don't like disingenuousness, and I don't like unoriginality. And like my values in the past slide, these pet peeves I have about book blurbs, I think are also equally applicable to the literary world more generally. But I want to unpack for a second what I mean by these things in reference to book blurbs. So, reinforcement of literary hierarchies. As I'm sure you may have noticed, the publishing world does still function on hierarchies in various ways. Whether it's nepotism or elitism or the kinds of ways that, like, what kind of school did you go to? And the kind of school you go to influences the kind of career you have, and the awards you win influences the career you have, and the people you know influences the career you have. And then there can be various tendencies to put writers on pedestals for winning awards or for selling a lot of books or for making a lot of money or whatever, whatever, whatever. All of those things I am not interested in. I mean, I'm interested in them. They're very interesting problems. But I try to stay away from them and minimize their impact on my work as much as possible because I don't find them particularly helpful to dwell on. I think inevitably we dwell on them because they affect us, but um, I still try to steer away from that and towards things I value more so. And so book blurbs, the way they're bound up in this, of course, is, I'm sure you've noticed if you look at like a book from a big five publisher, especially if they're a big name author, they have got a laundry list of all of the other famous authors with big five publishers, and they are all saying, oh, this work is wonderful, and they blurb each other and whatever. So we see how book blurbs can contribute to these hierarchies and sort of uphold them. Disingenuousness is probably an obvious one and is kind of related to this like what we were just talking about. Like disingenuousness to me is like people who either blurb books they don't really like, maybe at worst blurb books they haven't really read. It's hard to tell. I don't think we have great stats on how widespread that is as a phenomenon, but that does not mean that we as blurbers or whatever have to contribute to it. We can certainly steer ourselves in the opposite direction. And then the other thing that bugs me about book blurbs often is unoriginality. I'll give some examples of what I mean by that. But basically, yeah, I'm going to stop there for the moment. I'm sure you can guess what I mean. Let's go into the actual practical, concrete examples. So I have split this presentation up into the sort of different ways each of us can relate to a book blurb. Um, if you are a writer, you've probably done all of these things. If you are more of a reader, you will have done some of these things. We're gonna look at like if I'm on the receiving end of a book blurb, like I've written a book, I need a blurb. We're gonna look at if I'm writing a book blurb for someone, and then we're gonna look at like also if I'm just a sort of slightly more passive recipient of the book blurb. I am like maybe considering buying a book, I'm reading the blurb, but so let's start with like, what do I do as a receiver of book blurbs to sort of make the experience more enjoyable, to push it towards things I value about blurbing and literature and push it away from the things I do not like? So the first thing I do is if I'm looking for people to blurb one of my books, I try to do a lot of research on my own. I certainly don't rely on my publisher who, may know many things about me and my book, but they certainly don't know everything. They don't like you are sort of the best authority on your own book in most cases. So I try to do a lot of research and generate a list of authors who I might think might be a good fit for giving me a blurb. And so I try to look at like writers who've influenced my book, like whether that's stylistically influenced or I read a bunch of their books as like research for content or whatever it was. I might look for writers who have just in general influenced me as a writer, and whose uh, you know, whatever it is, tools I might use in my own writing regularly. And then I also look to writers who are already familiar with my writing. So that could be like, people you've taken classes with, people you've done readings with, people whose books you've reviewed, whatever it is. Like if we've had some kind of engagement with one another, they're usually maybe a good place to start to think about as like someone who might write a blurb. Notably, like I generally on this list of people I think might be good blurbers, the focus is not on like who's the most well-known author I can possibly convince to blurb my book. It's more like who's a good fit for the book itself. And to me, this really works toward like undermining hierarchies, which I've already said I don't like. It works toward further like building connections in a literary ecosystem because you work with what like existing connections there are, whether those are like personal, professional connections or whether those are, um, just the other books that your book is in conversation with, like thinking about it as like like I said, like an ecosystem, like an environment you're in, and like where does my book fit? And so who are the people like closest to me in that ecosystem who might be good people to sort of comment on my book? Um, at that point, I might talk to the publisher. I mean, there's a number of ways that you relate to your blurbers. You might, if they're like someone you know closely, you might just reach out to them yourself. But if there's someone you don't know, sometimes it's easier or more appropriate for your publisher to reach out. Um, again, using like if we use this concept of like an ecosystem, it's sort of like figuring out how everybody relates to each other and where I fit in there and proceeding accordingly. A big thing, of course, is not taking rejections or silences or non-response from blurbers personally. There are a million reasons why people are busy or don't think they're a good fit, don't want to hurt your feelings, and it might have nothing to do with you or the quality of your book. And so in the interest of like sort of preserving relationships and thinking about writing and literature as like a reciprocal activity that we do with and for one another, um, you know, understanding that those relationships shouldn't be like one-to-one transactional. And so, you know, just accepting the blurbs you get and not worrying about the blurbs you don't get. As a writer of blurbs, I actually think for me this is the bigger part of the work. Um, and so there's going to be a few slides on this one. This one I have a lot of thoughts about. So there's a bunch of work I do before I even write the blurb. Obviously, in some kind of uh, I, as we all know, life is not perfect. A more kind of practical approach to writing book blurbs, which is like when I think about writing the book blurb, basically like, is that as good a use of my time as it would be to work on my own writing or read a different book or edit a friend's poem or whatever other literary things I could be doing with my time? Does writing a book blurb feel equally meaningful? Does it feel like it's contributing to the kind of literary life I value having, all of that kind of thing? If yes, and if, just on a practical level, I have time to do it, then to me, that's a good reason to do a book blurb. On the other hand, if I am having this feeling, like, when you have like a household chore, like laundry or I don't know, raking leaves or whatever it is you do, and you're like, oh God, I got to do that later. If that's the feeling you're having when you're thinking about the prospect of writing a book blurb, I take that as a good sign not to do the book blurb. The unconscious mind tells us all kinds of things in sometimes very indirect ways. So if I've decided doing this book blurb is a good idea, what do I do? So obviously I read the book. I would never write a book blurb for a book I've not read completely in full. So that goes back to this idea of like valuing ingenuousness and sincerity when writing a blurb. Um, and I really try to make note of like, as I'm reading, like what are things that are standing out to me as being special, important, unique, whatever. Like what is making me care about this book? Why do I think anyone else should care about this book? Is it something about the content? Is it something about the form in which it's written? Is it, I mean, a million things, of course. But I try to make some notes about like what makes this book stand out and what makes it really truly worth reading. And then if they're available, I'll also look at promotional materials for the book, not because I want to be constrained by them, but because I want to look and see, like, is there anything in the synopsis or in the other blurbs, again, if they're available already, that feels like missing? Like, is there something they haven't picked up on that's like really cool about this book that I can draw attention to because I noticed it and I think it's worth drawing attention to? And so I usually take that as sort of my starting point for writing a blurb. The other thing I do as I'm crafting the blurb is like I treat it like any other writing activity. Like if I were sitting down to write a poem, I would care very much about my craft and style and having like, a compelling voice and whatever it is you think is important in writing craft and style. For me, it's like I love, I call them $10 words. Like I love good vocabulary. I love a sense of rhythm in prose. I love et cetera, et cetera. Whatever those things are that like you think makes writing good, like prose writing good, apply that to a book blurb. I mean, a book blurb should also be beautiful. Well, I say should for my value system. I don't want a blurb personally. I don't hate a blurb that just sounds like marketing copy. I realize it is marketing copy, but at the same time, it's like your blurb is talking about this book to people who are readers and people who are writers and people who love the written word. And so I think a blurb should reflect that beauty of literature within itself and within the way it's written. Um, I said I don't like unoriginality, so like I have to be honest, I didn't put all of them here, but I have a list of words I just absolutely hate to see in a book blurb. I completely made up this quote, a luminous debut from a writer to watch, but like how many book blurbs we have seen that are some variation of that or some variation of like a propulsive page turner or whatever. Like there are definitely catchphrases people love to use in book blurbs, and I'm not saying don't use them. I'm saying personally when I'm writing blurbs, I know I don't find that compelling, and so I try not to use them. I try to like find more original or more at least more like personal to me and my writing style ways of talking about the book. Because like if someone is writing asking you to write the blurb, it's because they like you and your work and they respect your work or whatever it is. And so I want to bring myself to the writing of the blurb in a way that highlights the book and highlights its wonderful qualities, and also is written in a way that couldn't have just been said by literally anyone else. And then after writing the blurb, I think this is kind of an sometimes underappreciated part of the work. But I think it is actually good to like maybe connect with the writer in some way. Like if they're a friend or if they're at least someone I know as an acquaintance, like I will reach out to them. I'll maybe talk to them a little bit about their book. The reality is most of us writers receive relatively limited attention for our books. And writers love to talk about the work they've done. And it's a great way if I've just read the book, it's a great way to, bond with other writers, um, talk to them about their book a bit, and also maybe tell other people about their book, whether that's like word of mouth or you post on social media or whatever it is you do. I think like as a blurber, in a way, you're kind of like a herald or an ambassador of the work. You don't have to do that. It's not a requirement, but if you've done all this work to read the book and write the blurb and you really actually do love the book as much as you say you do in the blurb, to me, that's just sort of like a natural outcome is that I'll try to share that with others. Okay, as a reader of blurbs, this is one of the easier jobs, I think, is just, you're looking at books and sometimes you read the blurbs, or maybe you don't. Um, I am a bit ambivalent about this. I go both ways. Blurbs are almost never the main reason why I pick up a book. I usually am looking at like the synopsis or what a reviewer has said about the book or like something about the content of the book that really compels me. And I would never not pick up a book because there aren't any great blurbs on it. That's just completely counterintuitive to me. I suspect many readers feel the same way, but again, I don't know that we actually have a lot of great stats on the sort of marketing effectiveness of book blurbs. Um, and so, like when I do pay attention to blurbs, it's usually because they have something in the description, like as if I was reading the synopsis of the book. They have something that really like stands out to me. It's like, oh, that's a particular quality in this book that sounds really intriguing to me. There's something unusual. Like I know as a reader, I'm never impressed again by, as I just said, like things like, oh, this is a writer to watch or whatever. Okay, like that's great. There's a million writers. You can watch any writer. Um, what I look for is like clues in the blurbs, clues as to like what the book is going to be like. Is it the kind of book that I normally would want to read, or is it there's something strange or surprising about the blurb that really draws me to that book? Um, I'm usually not really interested in like who has written the blurb because again, literary hierarchies, not super interested in those. But if there's like an author whose like work I personally absolutely love and they've said something that kind of intrigues me about the book, like that might help sell me on it, only in the sense that I'm like, well, if that writer is working in a sphere I'm interested in and they're very interested in this other book, maybe they're all inhabiting the same part of the literary ecosystem, and maybe that's a place I kind of want to wander around for a bit. Uh, and that's about the end of the presentation. That is what I do in my various relationships with book blurbs. But the question to you now, what will you do?
Questions. Not questions. Woo, get off the chain, get off. Hey. Who's got questions about book blurbs? No? Oh, you had a thing. You've got a question or no? Okay. I mean, I will ask questions if nobody else will ask questions. Hi, Jane. So, how do you ask somebody to blurb your book? Because that seems like really vulnerable and scary. And like, what would be the best way to present it? Like, I feel like I'd be like, hi, like, no pressure. You don't have to. I really like you. Please, it's okay to say no, but would
Yeah.
you? And like, there's probably a better way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does depend hugely on whether you know the person, how you know the person, et cetera, what your whole past relationship is. Um, I would say I guess I'll talk about the most common scenario, which is maybe you know them a little bit, like you might have met at some point, or at the very least, you're very familiar with their work, like you have some kind of connection. So I always start by being like, hi, I'm reaching out to you about possibly blurbing my book. This is how we know each other. Like, unless we're like best friends and they know me intimately well. I might be like if it was like, oh, I read with you 5 years ago to reading kind of thing. I might mention that just to be like, and then I briefly mention like why I thought of them, like why am I even reaching out to them? So, this might be like you wrote book, whatever, which my book has a lot of things in common with that book, and that's why I'm contacting you specifically, just to give them a sense that I'm not like randomly blanketing out emails to every writer I know asking for a blurb, which is not a practice I recommend. I do recommend it being very like specific and targeted in who you're reaching out to. So give them like a little bit of context for why I'm reaching out and if we know each other, how we know each other. Um, include like optional things for them to review, like, attached is a PDF of the book, or attached is an excerpt, or whatever you and your publisher have decided is appropriate to send out. Usually, like if it's someone who doesn't know me well, I might give like a short bio, maybe even as an attachment that they can read if they're interested. Short, like very short thing about the book that I think might draw them in, or like, you know, uh, help them get a sense of what I'm asking. Like, this is a 300-page novel, which is very different than being like, this is a 20-page chapbook. Like, give them a sense of what they're getting into. And then, exactly as you said, basically being like, no worries if not, kind of thing. Basically, I really appreciate you taking the time to consider this request. Absolutely understand if this doesn't feel like a good fit, but I just wanted to reach out. Like something just very kind of gentle and um, chill, as chill as possible, while still, being polite and professional and all of that. I don't think there's like a magic formula as far as I can tell. It's a little bit like when you do a submission to a literary magazine, right? It's like there's the basics, like give them the information they need, be polite, try not to be too long-winded, but give them a little bit to work with. And yeah, I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel on requesting book blurbs. And when all else fails, ask, a writer friend or your publisher or whoever, like, do you have a template for sending out book blurb requests, and work from there. That always works too.
What happens when you when you do a blurb and then you end up hating it or you're offended by the word?
I heard part of that question. I heard something about what happens if you hate.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear it?
Yep.
Hear it?
It's louder.
What's that?
Speak louder.
Speak louder. Okay, what happens when when you end up like you're asked to do a blurb and you hate it or you're completely offended by the word?
Oh, like if you're asked to do a blurb, oh, well, don't do the blurb. Like, please, for the love of God, don't do the blurb. Yeah, I mean, like people say no to book blurb requests constantly. A polite no, or even, and you don't have to say why. You can just be like, this is not a great time for me. Wish you out with your book or whatever. I've had some bizarre interactions with people around book blurbs, and like, I will not even say they were bad in the end. There was a very memorable instance where someone was like, okay, you've requested I blurb your book. I've read your book. I have 2 pages of thoughts on your book. But I'm not sure I really liked it. And they're like, but if you want to use something from the many pages of thoughts I have, you're welcome. And I was like, this is a very awkward interaction for both of us. It worked out well. We're actually like friends now. But I think probably in that instance, I don't have time right now would have been fine. I've also alternatively gotten, I am requesting a book blurb, and they were like, here's why I have a moral opposition to book blurbs. And we had a good chat about it. And again, that was also like totally fine in the end. We're on good terms and all. But I was like, man, like in the moment when I was just feeling sensitive about, my fledgling book, I was like, I think I would have just preferred a gentle, I can't right now. So that is my advice. If you don't like the book, definitely say no. If you're on the fence about the book, probably say no. If you feel anything less than like stoked to read the book and talk about it, probably just say no as gently and evasively as you can. Would be my suggestion.
I need a quick question, just I guess kind of about blurbs in general.
Mm.
Is there a world where maybe you are asking someone to do a blurb for your book and people expect like a payment? Is this something like artists just do like
Oh,
in goodwill, good faith, or is there a world
yeah.
where people are paying for these sorts of things?
I mean, I'm sure there is a world where you can pay for blurbs, but not one I would personally recommend entering. Which, there's, since I just mentioned this long moral opposition conversation I had about book blurbs, one of the sort of objections the person had to book blurbs was like, well, it's all this free unpaid labor from writers, and I completely respect that. I mean, I think that is why we have to be very gentle in our requests and understanding when people reject our requests, because it should be done for free. It's supposed to be just a completely good faith, like endorsement of your book, not a paid service. And it is a lot of unpaid labor, which I mean, I'm sure we all have lots of thoughts about the place of unpaid labor in literature and the complications around that. Yeah, book blurbs generally are done for free. I think that is probably for the best. Otherwise, just pay like a marketing exec to do your work. um, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think to me, having book blurbs be free is really sort of crucial to like the preserving some vestige of the like ingenuousness and sincerity and all of that. Um, I mean, like, yes, some people do book blurbs as favors to other writers or favors to a publisher or whatever. And, maybe it's not 100% sincere, but I think the fact that they're free at least minimizes that phenomenon a little bit.
Questions? Okay, thank you very much for being here with us today. Sorry.
Thank you so much for having me.
me. We'll all blurb all of your books for free, all of us. I'm committing on behalf of all of us to blurb your books for free. All right. That was very interesting to me because I remember there was a point where I realized that like if a book blurb said that the book was poignant, I was probably not gonna like it. Yeah. I guess I'm just that cold. But then I realized if you put other words with it, then like those words are contextual, right? Like if you tell me something's a poignant fear horror, I'm in. All right. Now is when I'm gonna like give a little spiel asking you for money. So if you want to go to the bathroom or order a drink, please do it now. Again, support latte. So I'm gonna get a picture and we'll put the picture out on the side. And if you have cash, you can put cash in the picture. If you don't have cash, because many people these days do not have cash, you can go to our website and there is a PayPal button. There is a PayPal button right there. There is a QR code. You could get your phone out right now and just like pull it up and be like, oh, here's how I donate with my money. Because OAC does a lot for us. OAC is fantastic, but you know, they can't cover everything. And all of the money that you donate to us goes to promoting diverse Canadian literature, which is great. I've also put these bookmarks out on tables. Feel free to take them home to keep your marks in your books that you are reading at home or that you are buying from some of our readers today. So Marta has a couple of books, Jessica has some books. I'll talk more about the books later, but some of the others have books that are here today. And if they don't, like Jade is here to, you know, Jade's not here in person to sell you books, but you can go to your local independent bookstore and buy them. And then you can keep your page with this, but these also have QR codes. So if you use these QR codes, you can also like go to our website and find our mailing list and all of those wonderful things. Oh yes, right. Mary would like you to take the journals. There's journals on the side there that are free for the taking, that Mary has donated. There's some like Wired, there's some Prism. So if you're looking for free reading material, Mary's lovely donated some to us tonight. Oh, and if you're looking for bathrooms, they're just there. And to the which right is my right? It's to the left. And yes, now that we are reaching the world through YouTube, we would love it if you would like and subscribe. So you can go to this video after the show and like hit like because you liked it in person, or if you're on YouTube, you liked it on YouTube. And if you subscribe to our channel, it helps like that algorithm to bring us up in the lists and the searches of other literature lovers. So it really helps us. So please like and subscribe. And now we can move on to the readers, I think. Again, if you're watching from home, please type your questions into the chat as you think of them. And so we can ask them of the readers at the end. We'll bring all 4 readers up and ask them questions. So first up, we have Morgan Christie. Morgan Christie's work has appeared in Callaloo, Writer's Digest, Room, Prism International, and elsewhere. She is the recipient of the 2022 ARC Poetry Poem of the Year Prize, 2023 Prairie Fiction Prize, 2023 Howling Bird Press Nonfiction Book Prize, and 2024 Porto del Sol Fiction Prize. You have been very busy over the last 3 years. Oh my God. All right, come on up, Morgan. We'll see how the height works for you.
Hello, everyone hear me okay? Yeah, all right. Well, thank you all for being here. It's much appreciated. Thank you, Product Series, for having this wonderful event. It's gonna be a good night. It's already been a good night. Thank you very much. So I'm gonna start today with some new work, actually. That's what I'm gonna be sharing in general. And so one of the things that I've been being asked about a lot with some of the programs I've been finishing is what it means to be a Canadian writer. And I think that's a very loaded question. I think there's a lot of tension associated with that question, especially as the child of immigrants in this kind of narrative. So one of the things I've been thinking about a lot is spatiality. And so just like we're on church right now, there's this deep history associated with the street. There are other areas in Toronto in which this is, you know, quite similar. So I have some work about an area called Black Creek that is a part of my past, some of my friends' past, and I'm going to share some stories about our culture and what that represents. So this will be new work for a new collection that I hope to have out soon. So this is just an intro to that, so the prologue here. On the west end of the city, where the goat is tender and pears and avocados are the same, there is a building. It howls the way an old house would, and the paint peels like overripe banana. There is a creek close by, where the water stands and shapes all at once. It ripples pools wide onto the granules of Tekaronto and dusted gray concrete lining the full and tired roads. Roads that intertwine between the crackle of street meat and smell of fresh pressed cane juice, its stalk shards running with the wind. Where the deep green of the pine trees blends with the soft orange of sunset, it almost looks like back home after a long day at work. Bus stops parallel the block where the building lives, pushing east towards the aunties of Scarborough and south and north, where high rises kiss clouds and factories sprawl across lots where grass was once decorated with dandelions. There is a building on the city's west end, where the people of the islands aren't all Bakayad, on a street called Black Creek. The people of this building slide through linoleum padded halls with fissured glass doors. They pack tightly together, like the canned mackerel and cream crackers they eat with them. Some of the tenants have lived there a few years and some a few generations, like Mr. Garvey and his daughter, planting callaloo on the top floor of the entire building. Or Miss Junie and her grandson scavenging the alleyways and crevices stockpiled with treasures people have forgotten. Or Peter, who grew up coming to visit his father every summer. Or Saf, who has sat at the same kitchen table in fear of a hot comb her entire life. Leaves have fallen and has surrounded their lives, their deaths, their hearts twisted up into the building they've called home. When they breathe, the building does too. It opens and closes with their whispers and cries, laughter and song. And as they come and go, their essence coats the building like warm honey on Johnny cakes and comes together like pieces longing to be whole. These are the stories of those people, the ones inside, breathing life into the building down Black Creek. The first one, sorry. I'll come closer in here. Is that better? Okay. All right. So the last thing I'm going to read is a piece of flash. Again, another story that takes place in this setting, in this building, and it's called Envelopes. So I'll just get into it. Okay? You prepare to step out of your apartment as the smell of callaloo hums through your house. The saltfish is missing. There was no room in the budget this pay, but the kids will enjoy it just the same. Leroy sleeps after the double he pulled. You think of his skin beneath the coolness of your sheets, umber and polyester twisted into something restful. You think of the kids running into your bedroom to wake their father as soon as they know he's home. Malika's insistence that her father touch every page of her workbook, and Tremaine's longing to be wrapped in his arms. You recall their faces. You recall their faces as you open the door and think of how neither of them resemble you, both totems of his lineage. And the thought blankets you tight, like the sheets before you arose. The building is quiet, but you hear the shuffle of the other morningers as distinctly as your own. Slippers gliding over the wood paneling above your head, masking their steps in motions that won't wake the house. You imagine the other breakfast being cooked, bammy with eggs and Vienna sausage and minced folded together, ackee with bacon, because you can't be the only one in the building that preferred saltfish this week. Chocho and spam, brewed coffee in a dollar, and porridges that range from rice to hominy, all hot and smooth to the taste. You listen as they glide and you shuffle to the mailboxes you forgot to check the day before, doing your best to deserve the other morningers sleeping families. The hall linoleum is dusty. You wonder if the other floors in the complex are also like this, if they made the same things that peeled in the corners, or if it's just the first floor, your floor. You remember the first time you and Leroy walked around this hall, his excitement and your hesitation. It's dark, you whispered. We can afford it, you whispered back. You wonder when the dust cleared. if it was after the children or with the constantly opening and closing door as of late. Tenants going and coming, unable to sustain the city anymore. Not even here on Black Creek, or down on Keel, or Eglinton. Jane will be next. Heard some of the women talking at Muriella's the other day. Where are we supposed to go when the places we have are no longer ours? You don't know, and you worry. You reach the mailbox. Its bronze-stained aluminum is tinted as the window panes surrounding the front door. You feel for the key in your pocket and can't remember when you put it there. You think of how much of a recurrence this is, things being exactly where they need to be, and no memory of how it got there. You open your slot, and the hinges cry like the girl upstairs above you when her grandparents died in that nasty business of the crash. And you grab the envelopes, so many envelopes. You zip through them like refrigerated all-purpose through the seal, and divide them on the way back. One hand junk, the other bills. You exhale, and you notice the bill hand weighs more. You're surprised you didn't kiss your teeth, but you realize you didn't have the energy. You re-enter the apartment and drop the bill pile in the mail bowl. Your low energy also preventing the task of opening them right now. You get rid of the junk and sit in the kitchen, wobbling on the uneven chair you haven't fixed, and stare at the mail bowl. You stare and fall into a daydream where the bills begin to multiply and start pouring out of the bowl. Piles and piles line the floor like the dust outside, until it's all you can see. You wake up from being awake and head to your children's room. You contemplate taking double shifts as well, arranging it before Leroy gets wind and the growing expenses start, and asking for cash jobs. You open Malika and Tremaine's door and see them there. You remember not having your mother around to wake you in the mornings because she had to catch at 5 o'clock. It wouldn't be the worst thing for them, but you want the first thing that you don't want that to be the first thing that they remember at their age. You want them to remember your voice. Rise and shine, it's but within time. You want them to remember their laughter as they immediately ask to watch that scene on repeat. You want them to remember the softness of your hand as you guide them through the bathroom, as you wash and press your fingers to their lips, and signal that daddy is sleeping, and we'll let him do that a while longer. You want them to remember the sound of you sharing the callaloo, your spoon scraping the side of the pan as they brush their teeth and dips of baking soda. And when they join you in the kitchen, once you've placed a single fried dumpling on their plate, and you listen to the snore singing through the house, you wonder if you'll ever get out of this apartment. Not by necessity, by choice. You wonder as they take mouthfuls of saltfishless breakfast and smile at each other with joy seeping from the gaps in their teeth. You wonder as you smile back, the mail bowl over your shoulder and the taste of rich greens with onions and slight Scotch bonnet that you have prepared. Then you stop wondering and just smile, because at least you have the taste of callaloo, and so do they. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, that was lovely. My wife is Jamaican. The first time she sent me to the Caribbean grocery store by myself. I am white, if you can't tell. I'm also a vegetarian. I could not figure out how to myself. I could not. I'm like, this fish, there's that thing. There's no label that says salt. A kind patron took pity on me. It was like, oh, you're making egg and saltfish. This is what you want. So next up we have Martha. Next up we have Martha Batzitz, born and raised in Mexico City, but has been living in Toronto since 2003. She's the author of 4 short story collections, 2 in Spanish and 2 in English, and an award-winning novella that has been published in Spanish, English, and French, A Daughter's Place from House of Anansi Press. Oh no. We're starting a new sentence. A Daughter's Place, House of Anansi Press, is her first novel. Yeah. She teaches creative writing in Spanish at U of T's School of Continuing Studies and Spanish Language, Literature, Translation, and Creative Writing at URQ. Come on up, Martha. I love some bilingual.
you. Thank you, Dorian. Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me properly here? Okay. So sorry, I'm short. We Mexicans come in small packages. This is my first novel. It's a historical fiction piece. And I want to start by asking you, who here has heard of a guy called Don Quixote? Oh, a lot of you. Great. Okay, so Don Quixote, as you may know, is the most important book ever written in the Spanish language, considered the first modern novel. It was published in 1605. It became an immediate bestseller in Spain, was translated into English and all other European languages. Shakespeare read it, apparently, because he composed a comedy, a play that is lost, based on one of the characters in Don Quixote. And Don Quixote's author is called Miguel de Cervantes, and he is the Spanish language's most important writer. To us, is Shakespeare. And so I did a PhD in Spanish, and I was researching his plays for my dissertation, which I'm not going to be talking about here. And I discovered he had a daughter. And this was an illegitimate daughter with whom he had a very, let's say, complicated relationship. And when I started researching about it, I saw that most of the scholars that I came across were talking about this daughter as ingrate, as a pain in his neck. You know, she brought him so much grief. And I was thinking, well, you know, coincidentally, and don't blame me because I'm a feminist, most of those scholars were men. So I was thinking, I wonder what she would say, you know, like it takes two to tango. There must be a story behind this that I can find out what it is like. So I started researching. Long story short, I researched like for 10 years in my spare time, you know, looking for information because there's almost nothing on the women who surrounded Miguel de Cervantes. But he was a man who was surrounded by women all the time. His daughter, his niece, who lived with him until the end of his days, his sisters, his wife. Those are all the women that were living with him as he wrote Don Quixote. And so when I started researching into the women of his life, I was like, his life was fantastically and very interesting, but the lives of these women are breathtaking, and no one had written about them. So I was like, I'm Mexican. I guess if I do this, maybe next time I go to Spain, they're gonna hang me from, you know, somewhere. But then I decided Cervantes is the best writer, the most cherished writer in Spanish language, and Spanish is my native tongue. So I was like, I'll just do it. So I did. But just to finish my introduction very quickly, it so happened that the lives of these women were so dramatic that I was thinking, if I write this in a serious way, no one is going to believe it, or they're going to think I'm being corny because I'm a bad writer, and because, you know, they're going to think I'm making everything up. So I decided, how can I work around this? And many years and even more pounds ago in Mexico, I was a soap opera actress. And yeah. And so I decided to write it as a soap opera in a theatrical structure. So it's 5 acts divided in, you know, chapters that really are like soap opera episodes. And this is it. So I'm gonna read the opening for you. This is Isabel speaking. Isabel is Miguel's daughter. My little sister Anna and I were washing dishes when a knock on the door startled us. We remained still, listening. Grandmother was outside and we were not expecting visitors. There came a second, more insistent knock. Don't answer, Anna said, her eyes wide. Whoever was outside seemed impatient, but my sister gestured for me to stay put. When grandmother failed to appear and the knock came again, I had to see who it was.
Laundresses, servants, day laborers, and craftsmen were among our neighbors, and perhaps it was one of them. But just in case, I grabbed the poker that sat by the stove before I opened the door. A lady greeted me with familiarity as she lifted the impeccable silk mantilla covering her face, though her smile faded when she saw the poker. I laid it on the floor as soon as I recognized her. She was a former client who used to buy wine from us when we ran the tavern. I was so impressed by her hat, which matched her overskirt and bodice, that I forgot to ask what she was doing so far from the tavern. Was it a velvet ribbon around her waist? Mother used to own a velvet waistcoat that she wore to mass on Sundays. It was an item that I should have been allowed to keep, but the doctor said it was contaminated with the foulers of the sick room and had to be burned. The only things I had been able to rescue for myself and Anna, and only because no one was looking, were a small mirror and a silver pomander which I hid so that no one could take them or force me to sell them. "Are you going to invite me in?" asked the lady. I moved aside to let her in and closed the door firmly behind her. She frowned in obvious disapproval as she scanned our living quarters, which were nothing more than the room we stood in and the kitchen beyond it. There was the mattress we shared, a straw rug, 2 worn chairs, and a shelf on the wall that held our few plates, utensils, and rusty pots. There was a bench by the kitchen fire where I, my sister, and our cousins, Jeronima and Marita, sat in the winter to eat our meals and keep warm. Yes, everything was basic and sad-looking, but as the lady's frown gave way to a look of pity, I felt a note of anger in my stomach. What else did she expect to find in this part of town? Before I could speak, grandmother appeared in the room. One look at our visitor and her face lost its color. Her hands grasped tightly onto her skirt. Anna stood close behind her. "Won't you introduce us?" the lady asked, looking at grandmother. "I thought you would have mentioned that I was coming." Grandmother looked as if she wanted to say something but had forgotten how to speak, and the visitor shook her head impatiently. "I'm Magdalena Pimentel de Sotomayor," she said, turning to me with a bow. She seemed to be waiting for a reaction, but I wasn't sure what was expected of me. At the tavern, she had simply been another one of our customers. True, not many women came to buy wine on their own, but she always did so in the morning when the tavern was practically empty. As mother's medidora, I measured the wine and poured it into her leather wineskin. Or Magdalena de Cervantes, if you will. Miguel is my older brother. I am here on his behalf. As I continued to stand there, she examined me from top to bottom. The expression in her eyes revealed that she was satisfied with what she saw. "You are his fitting image, no question about that. You always have been." I could feel the hair on my arms stand up. "What do you mean?" 4 simple words, but I had to push them out. They were tangled in the knot my throat was knitting. Anna was biting her lower lip the way she did when she was nervous, a habit she had acquired after mother's death. I had to remind her constantly to stop. She was making her skin bleed. "You look just like him," Magdalena was smiling. "Your father?" I was only 7 years old when Papa passed away, but as a frequent customer, she must have met him. He was a silent, serious man. My sister never knew how big his hands were or how angry he could get when I didn't follow the rules. Once I almost choked on a piece of orange I tried to hide in my mouth. I wasn't supposed to eat between meals, and when he saw me doing so, he hit me. Mother didn't speak to him for 2 full days after that. Yet despite those memories, I was proud of Alonso Rodriguez, tabernero de la corte, an innkeeper for the crown and the one we had to thank for our Tudesco Street tavern and former home. "Isabel, my child, there is something you need to know." Grandmother's voice was heavy and dark, like Papa's eyes before he hit me. "You are not Alonso Rodriguez's daughter." Anna let out a cry and ran to hug me. The knot in my throat unraveled, releasing a sudden sob. "I don't understand." Grandmother spoke slowly, aware of the pain every word was causing me. Alonso Rodriguez wasn't your father. None of them dared to break the silence while I absorbed the news. The man who had raised me and made sure that Mother, Anna, and I had a roof over our heads and food on our plates, the man whose soul I prayed for every night, was not my father. Then who is? I cried. My question was directed at grandmother, but our visitor answered instead. My brother, Miguel. I'm your aunt. My aunt? How could she have come to the tavern so many times and never said a word? I hardly remembered her saying hello or goodbye. All sorts of questions were brewing in my head, yet the only thing I managed to blurt out was, have you always known about this, grandmother? Yes. Her eyes were fixed on the floor. It seemed that as if she wanted to swallow the words rather than speak them. I knew this would happen one day, especially with your dear mother gone. And what about Aunt Luisa and Uncle Juan? Did they know? Luisa was my mother's sister and Anna's godmother. She couldn't have agreed to such a lie. My mother's brother Juan was a priest. Priests always told the truth, didn't they? I needed grandmother to look me in the eyes, but she was gazing at a point beyond the wall behind me. Juan, no, but he'll find out now, she said. I gave a sigh of relief. At least I could still trust my uncle. Luisa did, she added. That's why she's not home now. She didn't have the courage to face you. I shook my head in disbelief. She couldn't face me? How could I face her after this? Is Papa my father? Anna blurted out, trembling. Grandmother nodded, he is. Her sigh of relief was the final blow. Ana Rodriguez Villabranca, my sister, was Alonso Rodriguez's daughter. Like me, she was an orphan, but Alonso was her legitimate father. No one had shown up to take that certainty, the privilege that such status afforded, away from her. No matter how poor she was, how destitute, she would always be respected in a way that I would never again be. I knew this because I remembered the contempt with which men and women at the tavern pronounced the word that now defined me. Bastarda. How many times had I heard them spit out this word like it was a fly they had found floating in their wine? You want to read the rest of the telenovela? It's right here. Thank you so much.
That's so great. I watched Jane the Virgin. I know all about telenovela. Right? There's so much great Latin American literature too. I just read Mexican Gothic. I might have like let on a little bit that I like a little bit of horror. Yeah, so good. That was amazing. Thank you so much. I can't wait to read your book. Next up, we have Jessica Povetsky, a disabled opera singer, professor, and intersectional eco-feminist poet. Named one of Toronto's exceptional up-and-coming writers by Open Book, she authored Oratorio and The Wrong Place with Anstruther Press. The Problem with Having a Body was published with Gordon Hill Press, and Renocide is forthcoming in fall 2026. Jessica. I'm feeling your tone.
Yes. This one here. Are you gonna do it? Yes. I need both hands. No. Maybe even more. That. Can you hear me? Hello. Thank you so much. It is such a joy to be here. I am overwhelmed. Thank you so much to Brockton Writer Series, everyone involved. Last time I've been invited to speak here today. Thank you to the other readers and your remarkable work. Honestly, what a joy to share the space with you. And I'm gonna put this here. I have a tendency to go on and on. So I needed to stop myself. And I'm also very grateful. I'm reading to you from my latest collection of poems, which was published earlier this year with Gordon Hill Press. I'm also going to read you some new baby poems that have never seen the world, except for my editor's inbox. There was a forthcoming in Grenaside, which is out with Gordon Hill in 2026. And I feel very grateful that I wrote most of these poems while living in Toronto. I'm a guest on this space, of course, as a settler. So Toronto was covered by Treaty 13, the Williams Treaties, the traditional territories, the Mississaugas, the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. So I'm eternally grateful to be able to write and live on this space. I'm going to start with, okay, this one is the new book, and then there's the affectionately titled new book. So I'm going to start with the new book. This is a poem called Found. It was published by the wonderful editors at Grade. It is after Georgia O'Keeffe, Linda Paxton, Richard Sykin, Sylvia Plath, Raymond Carver, and Nico Harvey. Also, I have books for sale if you fancy a copy. This is page 9 of the book. I have done nothing all summer but wait for myself to be myself again. The sun oozes cerulean sky, a clot of swallows overhead. I peel my own orange, gorge every segment, globes of juice dart into my wrists and chin, swaddle my pain in my arms until it sleeps in an unlit room. I haven't shouted since the ground glittered with ice, salt teeth stinging. How much can I change before it turns into murder, please? I'm desperate to get what I want, even so, for the good things to happen, for the asters to hurry, for the lindens to blush, for someone to forget a glove in my life and come back for it later. This is how you lose me. Bees are out on the razzle, pollen drunk, the triumph of their butterfly milkweed and lavender habit. Freckles in their velveteen green tell tales ever how you erupt. My mum would have kittens if she knew. Please soften, and not only when you're on a come down. This is how you lose me. I won't eat for days and dream of holding myself through the tissuey air of the Humber Bay Arch Bridge. That was published in Reverie. The Whole Damn Moon, which is dedicated to my Rottweiler. Can we chronicle the sky? Cornflower with milk white apostrophe stars strung in its abundance. A neighbor at my door knocking, one hand a fistful of daffodils, their canary trumpets, the other catching and cooing over my heart as it runs amok. I want to be swaddled like that. The ghost of tissue paper for leaf stems, fingers permed around ribbon. Compose me an incantation for splendor, a posy for the medicine of honeyed tea, another for the ritual of sudsing and soaking my Rottweiler's dish. He makes it look easy. His boundless joy barks ricocheting graffitied underpass. Yes, you are prairie fire blossom. Yes, you are a whole damn moon. Oh. I'm going to read from the new book. Grenaside. There are 2 sections to this book. One section is, first section, Grenaside, is written entirely in phonetic Yorkshire dialect. I'm from Yorkshire, if you can tell. So that's the first section of the book, but the second section is called Dream Songs for 2 Working Feet. It's a cycle of 15 poems about a catastrophic injury I incurred after being run over by a truck. So I'm going to, time permitting, read you 3 poems from the new collection. These are brand new, so they're my baby poems, so be kind. Dream Songs for 2 Working Feet. This is number 1. Abandon the kitchen, peonies, roses, and a pebble dash of baby's breath exhale in a bucket in the sink. Walk towards the morning velvet sky, marmalade light, brave stars. Kind of cold that can take you, slip you into sleep. Press on, coat flung open, gloves off. Wrangle ram horn handles through the garden jammed with the carcasses of beans and zucchini, the skulls from birds of paradise choke the spokes of your wheels. Pedal beyond a plot of yellowwood and black cherry. Dufferin Mall dilapidates, clouds so close you could on tiptoe touch them. In no frill, the surprise of a friend. In aisle 9, crab cream, eggs, Brussels sprouts in a backpack, blow kisses. Dodge a truck, it turns into you, rips the flesh from your foot. scream onto Bloor Street, arms out, a starfish, beg pedestrians, promise paramedics, you're not normally with this. I had to smile because Hannah's friend I ran into, middle of the pandemic. So I'm gonna read you another one from that collection. This is number 6, not that they're really in any particular order. A truck grinds her foot into flour, mangled, fresh, incandescent blood, plum skin stretched over cranberry flesh. It seesaws categorizations of limb and meat between alive and necrotic. Who knows if she'll keep it? There's a pandemic. Everybody calls. Her nurse teaches her how to pray, hand high-fiving heart, eyes to sky, to a mutiny of swallows. She daydreams fire, smoke fogging, oyster pink lungs, of weightlessness in the belly, like being pushed on a swing, counts on her fingers how many seconds until she snaps onto Church Street, of downing all her oxycodone. It's been so long since she cubed shallots to stemmed broccoli, had her arms up to her elbows in dishwater muck. She can't stop it. Each day, a different woman scrubs her shoulders, slathers sandalwood and vanilla, towel dries her hair, immaculate. She can't crumble. The tonnage of isolation buckles her spine. She wants her life to be a circus of dogs, of overripe peaches, of redolent mowed lawns. This is the last poem in the cycle, which is dedicated to Maggie, my pit bull poodle. There's a dog. Her pit bull licks, noses her side, bagel formation, circular dog, shoe polished snout, tail a feather, cushions a mass, velvet, corduroy, crepe nests closer. When she chases the ball, nothing else matters. A flush of chickadees, wisteria sky, squirrels running amok. Ball is life. Rectangled cheddar of no interest. She knows astounding measures of language. Bedtime. Mama, can you get in your crate? She walks without her cane. Lassoes the creature to her waist. She coos. She understands everything. Doesn't pull or lurch. Reads her limp. Enumerates her pain. Unbroken eye contact. Their hearts connected by invisible string. Seven and a bit minutes left. I'm going to go back to the book. I'm going to read you Exile. This has a little homage to Anthony Doerr. Don't you want to be alive before you die? A prayer can be anything. This lilac morning, its navy blue branches and sparrow specks. I slice a radish and think of you. Everyone has the right to disappear. On our walks, the streets teeming with blossom, butter and peach pearl. Here's something I wonder. Because my puppy was born in winter, was young in winter, does she know instinctively there is a summer to come, or will it be a surprise? I have a throat full of Russian, not nonsense, nursery rhymes. I reread my sent emails to remind me who I am, slather cream on the reptilian skin of my knuckles and wrists, cross-hatched by paper cuts. Everyone has the right to do away with themselves. Pain zigzags. I exile my foot to remember when it was ripped off. Flesh seams fraying, dangling by a ribbon of ligament, salvage scrapped. I'm ragweed skinny again. Remember, now all the nice things mean nothing. I'm going to read Persimmon Season. This was published in Swamp Pink. Read the end of Persimmon Season, a year without their caramel flesh. January unspooled unendingly, sparrows ballistic among the fractured elbows of meadowsweet. The sky melts charcoal to apricot, snow silver and curdling. How can a body withstand this? Tape measuring time by surgeries, colon resections, an ectopic pregnancy, abortions, a crushed foot. Your heart smashes. Every good shell you hold, their velvet bellies, iridescent lavender and pearl, splinters to shrapnel in your hands. Cling to your pit bull poodle, scrub your knuckles red, wash and rewash the dish, your body protesting no, no. Okay, 1 minute. I'm gonna read all the things that come from a person leaving. If you read my bio, you'll see that I was raised first in Moscow, then in England by my mother and my grandmother. This is dedicated to my very dear granny. All the things that come with a person leaving. Move as if through honey, slower than you like to grow stronger than you are. Remember this. If your head's a swimming top at bedtime, it's enough just to close your eyes and rest. Gauge the bird by its song, the surprise of an owl's hoo at lunchtime, arrow geese overhead. Pansies suckle the windowsill, an oratorio from eggshells shattered in the sink. The almond flowering is another way of harnessing hope. Buttercup cheers you, yellows your chin. Clouds crochet away the burgeoning stars. I want to tell you all the things that come with a person leaving. The abundance of jumpers, a cotton lawn, the single piece of silver you box and sharpie. Unfold and refold your brief, shake it out, make it small, and get on with it. Keep your new shoes off the table. Never sew with pins lining your lips. When the oranges are round and ripe, eat. Let juice trickle back to your elbows. Litter the garden with their peel and pith. Keep the bugs away. Left.
I'm not, maybe I'll wait for question period to ask how many dogs you have. It seems like a lot of dogs. But it seems like a lot of dogs can be helpful if you have like a terrible accident. Yeah, okay. We were just actually debating with my wife and my kid on a road trip recently about like, if it's actually good to let dogs lick your wounds or not. This is what happens when you have children. So last up, Cheyenne Marie Sage is a Cree, Métis, and Salish memoirist, essayist, poet, and screenwriter from Edmonton, Alberta. Her essay Soar won first place in the Edna Stabler Essay Contest and then won the silver medal in the National Magazine Awards. She was the first Indigenous graduate from Columbia University's MFA in Creative Nonfiction program, where she worked on her debut memoir, Soft as Bones, which is now available everywhere books are sold. Her writing is a celebration of culture, showing the ways that Indigenous methods, cultural stories, and practices have great capacity for healing. She is often somewhere near trees.
Hello, everybody. So, Tanse, Cheyenne Marie Sage, Nitsigason, Amaskochis Wiskagan, Ochinia. So my name is Cheyenne Marie Sage, and I come from Edmonton, Alberta, originally. And yeah, so soft as bones, here she is, my baby, I call her. You know, it took me about 4 years was the whole process of like writing this book, editing it, selling it, like the whole shebang. And I always feel like that's very kind of beautiful and symbolic because in my culture, 4 is one of our sacred numbers. And you know, 4, it's a sacred number because it represents like the 4 areas of the medicine wheel, the 4 different houses that we have. You know, it represents the 4 directions. In our sweat lodges and ceremonies, we have 4 rounds traditionally. And, you know, so the fact that that number kind of came with me throughout the process of writing this book, you know, really kind of spoke volumes to me in terms of what it means to complete a circle. Because I'm always thinking about like life is like a spiral and history is like a spiral. And when we complete one loop, I was like looking at it like one generation. And when we begin that next one, then we're on to another piece of history or another life perhaps. And, you know, the 4 years that it took to write this, I look at as, you know, a generation, a life. And now coming out of it, you know, I feel like I'm entering into like this next phase of life, this next part of my life, because, you know, this book is, it's a tender and sensitive read, but it's also hopeful. It's also filled with a lot of love and a lot of joy and, you know, the positive aspects of family too. So, you know, Soft as Bones it's very much a poetic memoir all about, you know, kind of how I overcame a lot of intergenerational trauma within my family, within my household, within my lineage. And, you know, this book really helped me look at this core trauma that happened in my life, in my childhood, as a way of understanding it. Because when I was 12 years old, I had to testify in court against my father for sexually abusing my older sister. And, you know, this is one of the most difficult things that anyone could ever go through at any point in their life, but especially at such a tender young age of 12 years old. And, you know, I stand before you all today as, or not standing, I sit on screen before you today as, you know, a 31-year-old woman who has done a lot of learning, a lot of healing, a lot of analyzing, a lot of releasing, grieving, letting go, you know, where now I get to stand up here as a really joyful person, a really happy person. And it was many things that allowed me to get to this point. But I always say that like writing this book was kind of like the last little bit of like that deep excavation that I needed to do in order to process and relief. And so for me, writing and storytelling is so interwoven and intertwined with healing and letting go, essentially, like letting go of the anger and the pain. Because, you know, this book, it's dealing with, it tracks those cycles of abuse, you know, what happened in my lineage to essentially my relatives' experiences in the residential school and the 60s scoop, where they were physically and or sexually assaulted, almost all of my relatives. And so writing this book, you know, like I said, it's a tender body of work, but I weave together a lot of Cree stories, of ceremonies, and Cree words as well, as celebration of culture, but also as these were the things that like allowed me to heal. So it's me sharing some of the beautiful parts of my culture and my identity, and not just some of like the darker histories that, you know, come along with that, as an Indigenous person in this country. So before I do a short reading too, I'll just kind of say like what soft as bones means and how I kind of came up with the title for it. So soft as bones is this phrase that came to me one morning, maybe 2 years before this book was even the book. This was when I was just working on the essay that was mentioned in my introduction. And I was just having tea one morning, and from the heavens, I just heard this phrase, soft as bones. And I was like, soft as bones, like soft as bones. I just kind of kept repeating it. And then I wrote about it, and I wrote a little poem about it, and I mulled it over, and it just kind of sat with me and stuck with me for a while. But it's essentially this metaphor that I carry that encapsulates, you know, what it means to be strong and fragile at the same time. Because if I think about bones, inherently you think they're hard, right? But bones, they give us structure as human beings. They allow our bodies to take shape, to take form. They allow us to stand upright. We need them. They're essential. And, you know, on the flip side of that, they also can break very easily. And even though they can break easily, they also have this beautiful capacity for healing, to literally fuse themselves together together again. And so soft as bones is this philosophy that we are equal parts strength as much as we are delicate, and holding space for those, you know, seemingly contradictory ideas to exist at the same time. And so this book is that. It's me holding space for these seemingly contradictory emotions to exist together with one another. And so I'll start us off. I'll just start by reading, you know, a little bit of the beginning for us. A stum speak. Before that time, before then and now. I've thought over and over about the entry point to this story, our story of truth, or rather, the way that a truth can be crafted. And when the truth is crafted around a lie, the unraveling of that lie leaves a perception where reality feels precarious. I have to unravel my father's truth, or rather his lie, to render my reality, our reality, an honest one. We are an access point into a history, the grave consequence of schools and scoops for the indigenous people of Turtle Island. I write this story for all of us. I am trying to hear history. I am trying to hear the rapids of the river that flow past someplace beyond the bush. I am trying to hear voices of children who were buried and forgotten. I am trying to bellow their voices beyond the threat of meter sticks smacking hard against wooden desks lined with little brown fingers, and I want them to rise up as songs that reach the eagles who will carry them into the spirit realm. I am trying to hear myself as a survivor of deaths and shout from the mountaintops that every one of our deaths matters. I am trying to hear a quieting of shouts and gunshots and quiet sobs behind closed bedroom doors and my own silence. I am trying to hear my voice, the one that could have spoken up louder and prevented so much of what I had to see, what I saw, which could never compare to what she had to experience. She, the person I chased throughout the house, the person who put a curling iron to my hair and used barrettes to tuck the curls out of my face, her, the one I shared a bed with for most of my life. I am trying to hear the smallest of the three of us as she bangs on our door in a smoke-filled room, and I want her to know that I always thought I locked the door to shield her, but I didn't realize that in doing so, I silenced her. And I want to hear her sobs and livid laments and the sound of a phone being whipped at my forehead. I am trying to hear my apologies after I backhanded her onto the couch with my nose dripping white, and I am sorry for shutting her out. I am trying to listen to how we survived it all. I thought I would weave our story together as 3 strands of thread, the way we braid sweetgrass, body, mind, spirits. But I came to realize that each strand absorbs the entirety of the others. It is not just body. It is not just mind. It is not just spirit. We are all made from the same sinew, and in fact, we are not separate at all, but so microscopically connected that lines of demarcation are almost undetectable. And you can follow the paths backward and backward and backward, never fully reaching the beginning, but rather observing a different stage of the journey. I could begin with my father, but I am still waiting for the gaps in his story to be filled. I could go back further and begin with Mimushum, my grandfather, but that feels like a generation too far, even when the reverberations are still felt. I could begin with me, my beginning, because in a way, that is the end. And what better way to access a history than through the endpoint? A tracing back with a magnifying glass is the tool. A detective, a grave robber, a grave digger, rather, laying the groundwork where all the soft bones will rest. I think I have maybe a minute left here, so I'll read a little bit more. Ayak chiniweo. She covers somebody with earth. Akusipeao means it is due, there is due. And what is due if not something that emerges as a result of intense pressure? It is tiny drops of water that form on cool surfaces at night. When atmospheric vapor condenses at a rate far exceeding evaporation, it leaves its mark, a residue, an imprint of the thing that came before. I used to tell people that my father was dead. That truth was far more digestible, far less tragic, and much more acceptable for people to grasp than my truth. I was 12 years old when I buried my father alive. I don't mean that in the literal sense, but sometimes it feels like I do. I imagined him as a burial ground, a forgotten one, a covered up one, abandoned. One where someone would have to point out the site and declare, it happened here. If you start digging, you will find the children. Okay, I'll leave it there because I believe that was my 10 to 12 minutes. But yeah, that was a little bit from Soft as Bones, my baby, my tender body of work here. But thank you so much for listening, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. I actually just moved in the process of a move from New York City all the way to Hamilton, actually, of all the places. But really grateful that I've been able to log on and be able to be here still virtually with everyone. But thank you.
That was so powerful. Oh my God, I've got chills. Okay, so we're gonna get all the readers up here, and Jenna, you're gonna stay up there. Morgan, you can maybe just bring your chair around. And is this one free to fill out for Martha? For Jessica? Okay. I know, I didn't have time to move this table back. Usually I come and move the table. This is your process. Okay, so yeah, no, three chairs here and then on the screen, and then we'll go with the questions. All right, who's got questions for our amazing set, our amazing quadrat of readers?
The fun here is like we're ready for a shampoo
Yeah,
Melting.
it's a humid day.
Hi, everyone. Great work. I love all of your work in different ways, which is kind of what formed my question. I guess you're all just different people with different experiences, but what like made you form your sort of writer's voice? Like you're all just so very different, but very specific. Like, how does that happen? Do you just pick up a book and get inspired? Does it take years? Like what goes into just sounding the way you sound?
Thank you so much.
I guess we'll just kind of go down the line.
That's
In short, I think it was reading and community. It was this exploration of text and voice, I think, with a lot of other artists that were speaking to what their community meant, what their culture meant, and how those things influenced them. And like I said at the beginning, I think there's still the space where we're figuring that sort of thing out. But yeah, for me, I think it was figuring out where my community was and my relationship to my community. I think that's where my writerly voice sort of began to expand.
Love that, thank you. So I think mine is kind of twofold. So I'm a classical and opera singer. So before I started writing, my first degree was in music, singing, and I lost my voice. I have a condition called muscle tension dysphonia. And in those days, they didn't know what to do, so they just told, don't talk. So I was put on complete vocal rest. I wasn't allowed to speak. And this was before, like, even Facebook Messenger, like, you couldn't communicate with anyone. So I would walk around with this, like, whiteboard with a pen and write things down. And at first, you're a novelty. Everyone thinks you're fabulous. There's someone with they can't speak. We have to read their notes. And then after a while, it's not a novelty anymore. Everyone gets bored. I did find someone who didn't know that she was a perfect lip reader until we became friends. She could read my lips perfectly when everyone else was like, what? But anyway, so because I couldn't sing and I couldn't speak, I started writing. So I went to a creative writing class in my undergrad, and I saw the week on the syllabus that said poetry, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna skip that week. I hate poems. And it's a good job that I showed up. And I think the other thing that's really important for me is that I write a lot about working classness and what it means to be a woman silenced in a like patriarchal society, and what it looks like being a woman from a working class background in England, where social status and social class is really upheld hierarchically. And so if you speak the way I speak where I come from, you are assumed to be unintelligent, uneducated, So I started working at the University of Newcastle a few years ago, and they used to say to me, by gum, you can't be a professor with a voice like that, because they assume that you belong down a coal mine. And there is no such thing as unskilled labor. Working down a coal mine is a brilliant thing to do. But I've worked really hard to try and reclaim an accent that gets really undermined and really dismissed, at least back home in the UK. And so I'm really interested in phonetic language and bringing my particular voice and not being ashamed of my voice and bringing that voice into a space that is usually undermined for its working classness and for its feminines. Thank you.
That's so heartbreaking. A singer that cannot sing, oh my God. I want to hug you. For me, finding my writing voice came first in Spanish because I started writing in Spanish. It's my native language. And then I moved to Canada and I realized that if I continued writing only in Spanish, I would always be even more at the margins. You know, our community is small, within minorities, we're a minority. And I thought I want to have a career in my adoptive country. If I cannot write in English and have a career here, then I will forever feel like an outsider. And I love Canada too much, and I had to belong. And my way to belong was to first get down and be not as ashamed of my Speedy Gonzalez accent, and then get the grammar a little bit better, and then just go with whatever I had to say and say it. So it has been a lot of trial and error, a lot of shamelessness, a lot of fear that I had to overcome, and lots of reading and lots of writing and throwing out and starting again and throwing out and starting again.
Jane?
Yeah, so my journey of finding my voice was, I think, maybe a little more unconventional than like even a lot of my like classmates that I had like during my MFA program, because as a writer, I'm actually not very well read. Like I didn't grow up reading a lot. I pretty much read things like Twilight and, you know, romantasy and, you know, I think actually like fairy tales. Like I loved fairy tales and things with magic. And, you know, but throughout that whole time, I was writing poetry and behind closed bedroom doors, and I was writing letters as well. These imaginary letters to my father when he was in prison. And, you know, poetry became this way of me exploring and working through some of those more difficult emotions that I had. And so kind of behind closed bedrooms doors, like poems were coming to me, right? Poems and that sort of thing. And then when I started university, I started taking creative writing classes. And so I was taking fiction and poetry. And in the fiction classes, it was interesting because I was essentially just writing these kind of like veiled fictional accounts of the truth of what happened in my life. And so when the time actually came for me to sit down and start writing the book, or writing the essay rather, I felt like I had all of these tools under my belt, like these, you know, different like poetics and rhyme and images that I had been working with for a number of years, and then really kind of honed in and cultivated and focused on a lot more when I was in university taking creative writing classes. And in then too, like higher education, I actually started reading like a ton of trauma theory in different psychology classes, or as well as this one amazing class I took called like trauma in fiction. And so all of these kind of like different, I don't know, I call it like a hodgepodge, all these different things that I was interested in that weren't necessarily writing were impacting and influencing my voice. So then by the time I came to sit down to write it, you know, hybrid form just kind of flew out of me, and braided essays, and, you know, taking all these different ideas and weaving them together and having them be in conversation with one another. And that's kind of how my voice is now. My voice is a writer, but what I love was listening to everyone's story and journey of finding our voice, because it's so different and it's so unique to every single one of us, which I think is what makes being a writer like really special, and seeing all of like the diversity and the vibrancy in all of our different voices and all of our different works.
Was really well said, all of you. Yeah. I books with magic are real books though. I like books with magic. More questions? Any other questions? Anything from online?
I have one comment. I just have to say, with dogs, you're the master. With cats, you're the slave.
Okay.
That comment, sorry.
Okay, I kind of following on the question about like how did you find your voice? One of the things I'm interested in is like what does success look like for you? Like, have you made it? Are you successful now? Is this it? You're a writer, there's no more imposter syndrome. That's it, you're good. Or like, do you have things you still want to get to? Like, how comfortable are you with your status as a writer? Yeah.
Also being a woman. Well,
Being a woman, yeah, girl.
in all sense of trying to explore your identity within all the from different angles too. To be happy. That's it.
It adds a lot, yeah. As far as what it means to, I guess, meet, that's tough. I don't know, I guess this is just my constant. I think it's just always forward. Something my friend said to me a long time ago was keep rising. And this idea of just constantly pushing forward for a variety of reasons. Again, I think voice, our experiences, again, cultures, communities, all of these things influence so much of what we do. And I think consistently creating, sharing these stories and elevating these narratives, speaking truths to situations. I'm sure, we've all heard each other's work now. So there are personal effects, there are social and cultural things that influence these and conversations that we're having with the world around us and through our own stories as well. But as far as what it feels like with our space in that, I think it's just, for me, it's constant. It's constant. It's going to stay constant, I believe. Honestly, I don't see what the finish line looks like. I don't know, and I'm okay not knowing. I think that's a comfortable thing. And then as I'll say, as a woman, as a visible minority, as someone in this shape and space, I think that it just adds to the lending and constant responsibility and need for our stories. We still live in a space where I think much of literature, much of this conversation about the canon excludes a lot of people and a lot of stories. And I think being present, being visible in those spaces is also something that continues to push this need to want to continue.
Thank you so much. So on the one hand, I have this joke, like hashtag joke that I always, if anything nice happens to me, well, first of all, if anything nice happens to me in my life, my mom always says it's because I made you nice. So everything is because of my mom. But if anything good happens to me within the poetry world, I hashtag poet famous. Because like poets are not really famous. Like we're not really, we're not like Kim Kardashian or whatever, but it depends what you mean by famous. And like to be famous within the poetry world, to be recognized, like I went to the Griffin, I ran into, I ran into a bunch of other people and I was like, wow, I'm poet famous. Which feels like a big, like, what? I know people in the Cadillac community. That's a really lovely feeling. To me, more seriously, and in terms of success, I don't know. Like, I feel so blessed and so fortunate. Like, I really do feel sometimes that with poetry, especially if you are someone new and you're just putting things out into the world, whatever kind of writing you're doing, you know, you just have to find that one person that gets what it is that you have to say, right? You might get a gazillion rejections, but those people are just not, maybe they're just not ready to hear what you have to say, or that's just not their framework. They're looking at life through a different lens than you, right? So once you find someone who really digs what you have to say, that's brilliant. And that's what I think has happened to me. Like, I feel very blessed and very fortunate that I found you know, a handful of publishers who've liked my work. But in terms of success, I would love to write another 12 books. I would love to give up. I'm a professor by day, so I would love to give up the day job. Wouldn't that be a dream to just write poems all day long? Is that possible? Sometimes I meet people and they go, what do you do? And I say, I'm a poet. And they're like, you can be a poet. You know, it was like, they think I'm some kind of like medieval jester or something. But anyway, in terms of success, something that I think about a lot is what makes what looks like a successful life for me. And sometimes that's just like, okay, you know, I live in a body that has limitations as well. So I take that into account, what it means to move through the world with disability. And I think to myself, okay, so if I can have a day, like, what does it mean to live a big, beautiful life? If I can have a day where I wake up early, I love to be up at 5 a.m. My pit bull and I have one dog, just one. She and I take a walk. I drink one coffee, we go for a walk. Come back, I do whatever limited yoga. I used to be really into yoga. My body won't do it anymore. My foot just won't, but I do my own very limited version of yoga. As long as I've done a little bit of work, whether that is like academic, whether that is to do with my career, or whether that's like writing a poem or even singing, just warming up my voice in the morning. As long as I've done that and I've taken my dog on 3 walks and I've eaten a reasonable amount of times that day, that's a successful life to me. Like, that's enough. Like, that's to me, that's like, I'm living my big, beautiful life. I've spoken to my chosen family. I've gotten some people on the phone. So I think that like the meaning, and I also, I fight with this hyper-capitalist sense of urgency that we have to be productive all the time. Like, rest is so important. Sleep, like, I am militant about my sleep. I'm in bed by 6:30 p.m. sweat to you. Up at 5 in the morning, I know. But I'm just like, my body only asks for a few things to help sustain it. I am sick of this like capitalist mentality that my worth is based on my level of productivity. So how many poems can I write in a day? How many essays can I grade in a day? I'm like, no, how much did I rest today? Did my dog have a joyful time in the park chasing the ball? Like, those are the things that I want to center. I want to deprioritize all of the stuff that like our world tells us it should be super important. So thank you for asking that question. And I'm just gonna pass on the line.
Thank you. I'm gonna pick on what you said because I also think that success is very subjective. What does success look like for any of us, really? I think everybody thinks that to be a writer and be successful is to, I don't know, write a lot of books and have them all be bestsellers and earn a lot of money and all that. But then you can also have an empty life when you're doing that. I know a lot of people who have a lot of money and they're not necessarily happy. So for me, I think that success with my writing is having one person come and say that they read whatever it is I wrote and it touched them, that they liked it, that it spoke to them. And on top of that, you know, for me as an immigrant to Canada, just being here and having survived for so many winters and being able to make a living in such a privileged way, you know, teaching at 2 universities and helping shape amazing young minds in my adoptive country, that is already more than I imagined I would be doing when I arrived. So I feel very thankful and very blessed. And I try to just every day do the best that I can. And I am guilty of not resting enough and not sleeping enough just because I want to do so many things. Unfortunately, those are not things that pay me a fortune. But those are things that make me very happy. And as long as I'm happy, I feel successful. Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess thinking about my identity as an Indigenous woman, in this field of writing, I think I've experienced imposter syndrome so many times throughout this journey because, especially in my MFA and especially in higher education, I was often the only person who looked like me in the room. And, writing stories that maybe not everybody understood and learning to be okay with the fact that not everybody's going to get it and not everything I write is going to connect with everyone. But also too, like, thinking about even the earlier question about voices and influences and all of that, like, I think, I come from a very strong line of women, of really powerhouse women. Like, my grandmother was like the first Indigenous woman senator of Canada, and my mom, single mother, like fought tooth and nail to make sure we always had a meal and a roof over our head. And, I think having those women around me and having those experiences, some of those more challenging experiences as a young person, really has kind of shaped my view of success and what it looks like and what it feels like as a writer and also in life, because like I too believe in like balance and rest. However, as a BIPOC person, I've had to work really, really hard to be heard and to be seen and to be taken seriously. And, that can't go without being said. So, like, I have always put in a lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of hours into making my dreams come true. And so, I think for the longest time, I was like, okay, success to me looks like graduating from university. Success to me looks like publishing my first piece of writing and having people read my words. And, I think as someone mentioned, it's like the further you go along in your career and you move around, like the bar shifts and it changes, and sometimes it gets higher and sometimes you scale it back a little bit more. Like, now the big dream has happened for me, and I've published my book, and I'm like, okay, that is success, but what I consider to be more successful is like, the moments of making the book, like when I would sit down with my relatives and have those conversations or have tea together and talk about our experiences and holding space for one another and sharing those experiences. That is success. And those were moments of tenderness and joy that I really appreciated. And now that the book is out, I feel like I am constantly feeling grateful and gratitude every single day because, the messages I receive of different people saying, wow, I read your work and I've had the same trauma in my family. Nobody talks about it. Or, one young girl told me that my words allowed her to put words to her own relationship with her father that she couldn't yet do. And so those, to me, those are really the successful defining moments and the ones that, I don't know, remind me that there is no other career I would rather be doing. And just this feeling of like when you're on your life path doing what you're meant to be doing, to me, that is the ultimate form of success. And that's how I feel every single day as being a writer.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your reading tonight. I have a question that's more specific to Martha, but if anyone else have a similar experience, I'd love to hear it too. I really admire some of you write a novel in the second language. My hats off to you. So my question is, when you write in Spanish versus when you write in English, does your creativity process, is it different, or do you feel any differently? Thanks.
No, it's very different. For, normal writing, my short stories or stuff like that, when I use my own Spanish, it comes much more easily. When I'm writing in English, I have to think twice as hard. I have to use the dictionary. I have to go back and think, is the syntax correct? I have to read it out loud. Does it sound, awkward or does sound like something I have heard before, I am constantly self-judging. When I am writing in Spanish, it's way easier. But with the translation of A Daughter's Place, because I did a rewrite, it's not really a translation. I rewrote the whole thing in Spanish because I wanted it to be my Spanish, but not Mexican Spanish, because Cervantes cannot be talking like a Mexican, right? So I had to make a huge effort to bring all the Spanish from Spain I know and summon it and pour it on paper. And then I had to go and ask for help from a Spaniard friend who actually was born in the same town as Cervantes and is a Cervantes. So I was like, please help me polish this, because there are little like prepositions and things that the Spaniards use differently or don't use, little tiny things that you wouldn't notice unless you're a native from there, which I'm not. So it was for me a process almost as difficult as writing in English, but with an added responsibility, because if I write something in English that sounds awkward, thankfully I have an editor. I've had editors. I've had even Iris. When I read something, I always ask, please check that everything is correct. But if I make a mistake, everyone here understands. Like if she's Mexican, right? Like I'm allowed. So it's also liberating that way. But if I do that and a Spaniard reads it, I don't want to be fully ashamed. It's because it's the same language, and at the same time it's not. So I faced with this project and a new hurdle, and it remains to be seen what happens with this book in Spanish. I am terrified, but it's definitely, for me, writing in my Spanish from Mexico is the easiest, and writing in English now comes to me a bit more easily, but it's still a struggle. It's always, going up the hill. But if I didn't do it, I would feel mute and paralyzed. I have to, fight against that fear and just write in English, because I want to be heard, and I want for these voices to be heard. These women that live with Cervantes and the other characters that I have that are Latin American, women who have faced so many struggles as we have, because in Latin America we have had a beautiful collection of dictatorships. Yeah. So, I think that it's important to rescue the voices of those who have been oppressed there, and I made it my mission in my short stories to do that. So for me, it's important. It's a mission, it's a cause, it's a physical need, an emotional need, a psychological, difficulty, linguistic challenge. But I live here, so I cannot do less than that. So thanks for asking.
Thank you so much. Okay, we have one question that we always end with. I feel like we're running a little over, so I'm gonna ask you to keep it real tight. It's one book recommendation. One book that you think other people should read. This is coming off the top of your head. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be right. It does have to not be 3 books. One book that's not your own that you suggest people read.
I'll say something that's relatively new. Dion Irving, The Islands. The Islands, Dion Irving.
Dion Irving, The Islands. Okay.
Katharina Vermette, anything but Start with the Break. Yes.
I'm gonna go with my favorite book, the book that I wish I had written. It's not new, but it's immortal, and it's Beloved by Toni Morrison.
I love Beloved, phenomenal book, but I'm also going to recommend one of my favorites. It is by a poet called Naja Marie Eidet. I do believe she's a Danish poet. And this book is called When Death Takes Something from You, Give It Back. It's it's a brief book. It's all about the grief of the passing of her son. And this book moves like waves, like it takes you through the waves of grief. And one minute you're laughing and you're smiling, and the next minute you're crying. And it is truly one of the most beautiful books I've ever read.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you, everybody. We do post our book recommendations on social media. So if you didn't write those all down yourselves, you can check out our Insta, our Facebook after, and it'll be on there. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Thank you, readers. Thank you, audience. Thank you, Glad Day. Another amazing Brockton. We will see you again on September 10th. Probably in the new Glad Day space on Lisker Street and also on YouTube, where we will be hearing readings from Christopher Yusko, Mark Sampson, Steffi Taddy, and Farah Gafour. And as always, we'll bring in an industry professional to teach us something about the craft, art, or business of writing. Thank you, everybody. Good night.